The smell of burnt coffee and my wife's expensive perfume hit me like a slap as I walked through our front door at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. Marta was supposed to be at another client dinner until midnight, but her silver BMW sat in our driveway like evidence at a crime scene. I'm Daniel Foster, 41 years old, and I analyze clinical data for a living. Numbers don't lie, people do. After 18 years of marriage, I'd gotten pretty good at reading the statistics of my own life, and lately, the trends weren't looking good. Marta? I called out, setting my keys on the kitchen counter. No answer, but I could hear her voice drifting down from upstairs. She was on the phone, speaking in that low, breathy tone she used to use with me back when we were dating. I climbed the stairs quietly, my analyst brain already cataloging the anomalies. Her work bag was tossed carelessly by the bedroom door, unusual for someone as organized as my wife. The bathroom light was on, casting a warm glow into the hallway. And there was that perfume again, stronger now, mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. I can't keep doing this, Jake. Marta's voice carried through the partially open bedroom door. He's getting suspicious. Last week he asked why I was working so many late nights. Jake. I knew that name. Jake Turnbull, the flashy creative director at her advertising agency. 38 years old, divorced, drove a red Porsche that cost more than most people's houses. I'd met him at company parties, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and laughed too loud at his own jokes. Don't worry about Dan, Marta continued, and hearing my own name made my stomach clench. He's so buried in his spreadsheets and data analysis, he wouldn't notice if I brought you home and introduced you as the mailman. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. 18 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, family vacations, anniversary dinners, and this is what it had come to. My wife discussing me like I was some oblivious fool, while she planned her next rendezvous with her lover. Tomorrow night works, she said. He's got that bowling league thing with his pathetic friends. We'll have ours. Pathetic friends. She meant Mike, Tony, and Steve. Guys I'd known since college. The only people in this godforsaken town who still treated me like I mattered. The same guys she'd been subtly undermining for months, making little comments about how I should expand my social circle and network with more successful people. The lakeside place again? Marta asked. God, Jake, when you said you had connections, I didn't realize you meant access to millionaire estates. Makes me feel like I'm living in some kind of fairy tale. I heard her laugh, that musical sound that had made me fall in love with her 20 years ago when we met at a coffee shop near the university. Now it felt like nails on a chalkboard. I love you too, she whispered, and those 3 words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. She'd stopped saying them to me months ago, claiming she was too tired or too stressed from work. Apparently she'd just been saving them for someone else. The call ended, and I heard her moving around the bedroom. I slipped into our daughter Amelia's old room. She was away at college now, and waited. 5 minutes later, Marta's footsteps pattered down the stairs. The front door opened and closed. Through the window, I watched her BMW reverse out of the driveway and disappear down Maple Street. I sat on Amelia's bed, surrounded by her old posters and stuffed animals, and tried to process what I'd just learned. My wife of 18 years was having an affair. Not just a casual fling, but something serious enough that she was talking about love and making elaborate plans. She thought I was too stupid to notice, too pathetic to matter. Maybe she was right. I was just a clinical data analyst in a small Maine town, working for a mid-sized healthcare company, driving a 10-year-old Honda, wearing off-the-rack shirts from Target. Compared to Jake Turnbull with his Porsche and his connections to lakeside estates, I probably did seem pretty pathetic. But here's the thing about data analysis. It teaches you to look for patterns, to dig deeper when the surface numbers don't add up. And right now, my marriage was showing some very interesting statistical anomalies that deserved further investigation. I went downstairs and opened Marta's laptop. She'd left it on the kitchen table, password protected. But I knew her passwords. She used variations of our anniversary date and the kids' birthdays. Ironic, considering what she was doing behind my back. Her email was a goldmine. Months of correspondence with Jake, starting innocent enough with work-related discussions, then gradually becoming more personal. The shift happened around 6 months ago, right around the time Marta had started complaining that I was emotionally distant and not ambitious enough. Dan just doesn't understand me anymore, she'd written to Jake in one email. He's content to live this small, boring life, but I want more. I deserve more. Another email from just last week. Sometimes I look at him watching TV in his ratty old sweatshirt, and I can't believe this is what my life has become. When I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be alive. I printed out the most damaging emails. 23 pages of evidence that would make any divorce lawyer salivate. But as I sat there reading through my wife's betrayal, page by page, I realized something important. I didn't want a divorce. I wanted revenge. Not the kind that would land me in jail or make me look like the villain. Something smarter, more surgical. Something that would make Marta and Jake regret ever thinking I was too stupid to notice what they were doing. I was still sitting at the kitchen table when Marta came home at 1:15 in the morning. Her hair slightly mussed and her lipstick gone. "Hey, honey," she said, kissing the top of my head like nothing had happened. "How was your evening?" "Quiet," I said, closing the laptop and smiling up at her. "Just catching up on some work. How was the client dinner?" "Oh, you know how it is," she said with a dismissive wave. "Lots of talk about market positioning and brand awareness. Pretty boring stuff, I'm sure," I said. "Well, I'm heading up to bed. Don't stay up too late." As I brushed my teeth, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same unremarkable face I'd had for 41 years. But something had changed tonight. There was a hardness there that hadn't been there before. A calculating look that reminded me of the expression I got when I was working through a particularly complex data problem. Marta thought she was so clever, playing me for a fool while she lived out her fantasy with Jake Turnbull. But she'd made one crucial error in her calculations. She'd underestimated exactly how smart her boring, pathetic husband really was. And that mistake was going to cost her everything. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm and lay in bed listening to Marta's breathing. She was still asleep, probably dreaming about her next romantic rendezvous with Jake. I studied her face in the early morning light. Still beautiful at 39, with those sharp cheekbones and full lips that had caught my attention all those years ago. It was hard to believe that this woman, who'd promised to love me until death do us part, was now planning elaborate deceptions just to spend time with another man. I slipped out of bed quietly and headed downstairs to make coffee. While it brewed, I opened my laptop and started doing what I do best: research. Jake Turnbull had a surprisingly robust social media presence for someone having an affair. His Instagram was full of photos from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Boston, and his beloved Porsche. More interesting was his LinkedIn profile, which revealed that he'd been at T-Bold Advertising for only 8 months, meaning his relationship with Marta had developed pretty quickly after his arrival. I cross-referenced his posts with Marta's calendar and found the pattern I was looking for. Every client dinner or late meeting on her schedule corresponded with Jake posting photos from upscale locations around town. The man was documenting his own affair without realizing it. "You're up early," Marta said, appearing in the kitchen wearing her silk robe. She looked refreshed, almost glowing, the way she used to look after we'd spent a passionate night together. "Couldn't sleep," I said, closing the laptop. "Big presentation today." She poured herself coffee and sat across from me at our breakfast table. "I might be late again tonight. We're pitching the Hartwell account, and you know how demanding those clients can be." I nodded sympathetically. "Of course. I'll probably grab dinner with the guys after bowling anyway." "That sounds nice," she said. But I caught the flash of relief in her eyes. She was already planning her evening with Jake. After Marta left for work, I called in sick. Something I rarely did, which meant my supervisor wouldn't question it. Then I drove across town to Sullivan's Gym, a rundown boxing facility that also served as an unofficial bar after 5 p.m. Mike Sullivan, the owner, had been giving me life advice since I was 25 years old. "Danny boy," Mike called out when I walked in. He was in his 50s, built like a retired heavyweight, with graying hair and hands the size of dinner plates. "What brings you here on a Wednesday morning? Shouldn't you be crunching numbers or whatever it is you do?" "I need to talk to someone," I said. "And I need advice from someone who's seen enough of life to know how things really work." Mike gestured to a couple of folding chairs near the ring. "Lay it on me, kid." I told him everything: the phone call, the emails, the months of lies and manipulation. Mike listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small grunting sounds of disapproval. "So what do you want to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "I want to make them pay," I said. "But I want to be smart about it. I don't want to end up looking like the crazy husband who lost his mind and did something stupid." Mike scratched his chin thoughtfully. "You know what your problem is, Danny. You've been playing defense your whole life. Nice guy, steady job, reliable husband and father. But sometimes, when someone declares war on you, you've got to be willing to fight back. I'm not a fighter, Mike. I'm a data analyst. Same thing, he said with a grin. Fighting's just about knowing your opponent's weaknesses and exploiting them at the right moment. You've got the intelligence gathering part down already. Now you need to start thinking like a strategist instead of a victim. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 18 years of marriage. I followed my wife. I parked across the street from T-Bold Advertising and waited. At 5:30, Marta emerged from the building with Jake. They didn't touch or act inappropriate. They were too smart for that. But I could see the chemistry between them even from a distance. They got into separate cars, and I followed Jake's Porsche through downtown Edgewater, past the old mill district, and up into the hills where the wealthy families had built their estates overlooking the lake. He turned into the driveway of a massive colonial house, with perfectly manicured grounds and a circular driveway. I parked on the road and watched through binoculars I'd borrowed from our garage. Marta's BMW arrived 10 minutes later. She practically ran to the front door, where Jake was waiting for her. They embraced and kissed passionately before disappearing inside. The house was clearly expensive, probably worth more than I'd make in 10 years. I made note of the address and did some quick research on my phone. The property belonged to someone named Richard Thornton, a real estate developer who split his time between Maine and Florida. According to public records, the house was frequently rented out for corporate retreats and private events, so Jake had access to luxury rental properties. That explained Marta's comment about feeling like she was living in a fairy tale. While I was offering her dinner at Applebee's and movie nights on our old couch, Jake was providing champagne and lakeside views. I stayed until 9 p.m., documenting everything with photos and notes. When Marta finally emerged, her hair was disheveled and her clothes wrinkled. She looked like a woman who'd spent the evening doing exactly what I suspected she'd been doing. I beat her home by 15 minutes and was sitting in my recliner, watching the news, when she walked in. "How was the presentation?" I asked without looking up from the TV. "Exhausting," she said. "I think we got the account, but those clients are really demanding. I'm going to take a shower and head straight to bed." "Good idea," I said. "You look tired." The next few days followed the same pattern. I'd go to work, act normal, come home, and play the role of the oblivious husband. But in my spare time, I was building a comprehensive file on my wife's affair. Photos, emails, credit card statements showing charges at expensive restaurants on nights when she claimed to be working late. The more evidence I gathered, the angrier I became. Not just at the betrayal, but at how stupid they thought I was. Marta was using our joint credit card to pay for some of these romantic dinners. Jake was posting photos on social media that clearly showed he was with someone, even if he was careful not to include Marta in the shots. They were sloppy because they were arrogant. And arrogance, as any good data analyst knows, is a weakness that can be exploited. On Friday night, I was in our home office organizing my evidence when our son Ross called. He was 22, working at a tech startup in Portland, and still close enough to come home for family dinners once a month. "Hey, Dad," he said. "I was thinking of driving up this weekend. Maybe we could catch a game or something." "That sounds great," I said. "Your mom's been working a lot lately, so it'll be nice to have some family time." "Is everything okay?" Ross asked. "You sound different." My son had always been perceptive. Even as a kid, he could sense when something was wrong before anyone else in the family noticed. "Just work stress," I lied. "You know how it is." "Yeah, I guess." "Hey, is Mom around? I wanted to ask her about something." "She's at another work function," I said, "but I'll tell her you called." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet office and thought about my children. Amelia was in her junior year at the University of Maine, studying journalism. Ross was building a career in technology. Both of them were smart, ambitious, and starting their adult lives with optimism and hope. What would this do to them when it all came out? Because it was going to come out, that much was inevitable. The only question was whether I'd be in control of how and when it happened, or whether I'd be blindsided like I almost was. I opened my laptop and started typing. If I was going to fight back, I needed a plan. And like any good data analysis project, it started with clearly defined objectives and measurable outcomes. Objective 1. Expose the affair in a way that maximized consequences for Marta and Jake while minimizing damage to myself and my children. Objective 2. Ensure that my wife's betrayal cost her everything she thought she was gaining by cheating on me. Objective 3. Make sure Jake Turnbull learned that there are consequences for pursuing another man's wife. I worked until 3 in the morning, building spreadsheets, timelines, and contingency plans. By the time I finally went to bed, I had a comprehensive strategy that would have impressed my most demanding clients. Marta was still asleep when I slipped under the covers. She stirred slightly and moved closer to me, her arm draping across my chest in a gesture that might have seemed loving to an outside observer. But I knew better now. I understood exactly what I was dealing with, and I was ready to show my cheating wife and her arrogant lover that they'd made a very serious error in judgment. The boring, pathetic husband was about to become their worst nightmare. Saturday morning brought the kind of crisp October weather that makes Maine beautiful. Clear skies, bright sunshine, and just enough chill in the air to remind you that winter was coming. Marta was in an unusually good mood, humming while she made breakfast, and actually asking about my plans for the day. "I thought I might do some yard work," I said, buttering my toast. "Get the leaves raked before Ross gets here this afternoon." "That's nice, honey," she said. But I could tell she wasn't really listening. She was checking her phone, probably coordinating with Jake. "I might run some errands later, maybe get my hair done. Special occasion?" I asked innocently. "Oh no," she said quickly. "Just feel like treating myself." And after she left, I got to work on phase 1 of my plan. I'd spent the week researching Jake Turnbull's background, and I'd discovered some interesting information. He'd left his previous job at a Boston advertising firm under mysterious circumstances, and there were hints on professional networking sites that his departure hadn't been entirely voluntary. More importantly, I'd learned that Jake was married. Not divorced, as he'd apparently told Marta, but separated and in the middle of contentious divorce proceedings. His wife, Patricia Turnbull, was fighting for custody of their 2 young children and half of their considerable assets. I found Patricia's contact information through public records and sent her an anonymous email with photos of Jake and Marta together, along with documentation of their affair. I didn't identify myself, but I provided enough evidence to show that her estranged husband was spending money on another woman while claiming he couldn't afford proper child support. The email was sent from an untraceable account I'd created specifically for this purpose. Within 2 hours, I received a response. "Thank you for this information. My attorney will be very interested to see these photos. Strike 1 against Jake Turnbull." Ross arrived at 3 o'clock, and we spent the afternoon raking leaves and catching up. He looked good, healthy and confident, with the kind of energy that comes from doing work you actually care about. As we worked, I found myself studying his face, looking for signs that he suspected something was wrong at home. "Dad, can I ask you something?" he said as we bagged the last pile of leaves. My heart skipped. "Sure, son. Are you and Mom okay? I mean, really okay?" I leaned on my rake and considered how to answer. Ross deserved honesty, but I wasn't ready to burden him with the full truth yet. "Why do you ask?" I don't know," he said, shrugging. "She seems different lately, more distant when I call. And you seem, I don't know, like you're thinking about something all the time." "Marriage is complicated," I said finally. "Sometimes people go through rough patches. But whatever happens, you and Amelia are the most important things in the world to both of us. That'll never change." He nodded, apparently satisfied with that answer. But I could see the worry in his eyes, and it made me even angrier at Marta. She wasn't just betraying me. She was putting our children through the uncertainty and pain that comes with watching their parents' marriage fall apart. That evening, Marta announced she was going out with her sister Victoria for dinner and drinks. Victoria was recently divorced herself, a bitter woman who'd been encouraging Marta's worst impulses for months. I suspected she knew about the affair and was probably cheering it on. "Have fun," I said, kissing Marta's cheek. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." She laughed and grabbed her purse. "Don't wait up. You know how Victoria gets when she starts talking about her ex-husband." After she left, Ross and I ordered pizza and watched a football game. It was nice, just the 2 of us, like when he was younger and we'd have father-son nights while Marta was at her book club or out with friends. Simpler times, when I still believed my wife was exactly who she pretended to be. "I'm glad I came home this weekend," Ross said during halftime. "I miss this." "Me too, son." Around 10 o'clock, Ross went upstairs to his old room, and I settled in to wait for Marta's return. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:30, I got a text. "Staying at Victoria's tonight." She's pretty upset about something. See you tomorrow. I almost laughed out loud. Marta thought she was so clever, using her sister as cover for another night with Jake. But I'd been tracking her phone's location through our family plan, and I knew she wasn't at Victoria's house. She was back at that lakeside estate, probably sipping champagne and congratulating herself on how easy it was to fool her stupid husband. What she didn't know was that I'd been busy that afternoon while Ross and I were doing yard work. During a break, I'd driven over to the estate and had a conversation with the property management company that handled rentals for the owner. Posing as someone interested in booking the house for a corporate retreat, I'd learned that Jake had been renting it twice a week for the past 2 months, paying premium rates for discretion and privacy. I'd also learned something else. The rental agreement required a substantial security deposit, which would be forfeited if the property was damaged in any way or if the rental terms were violated. And one of those terms was that the house was for legitimate business or family use only, not for extramarital affairs. Armed with this information, I made a phone call to the property management company's after-hours emergency line. "Hello," I said, disguising my voice slightly. "I'm a neighbor of the Thornton property on Lakeshore Drive. There's been loud music and parties going on there for weeks, and I'm pretty sure it's being used for purposes that violate the rental agreement. I thought you should know." The property manager was very interested in this information. She promised to look into it immediately and thanked me for being a concerned neighbor. 20 minutes later, I watched from my car as a property management vehicle pulled into the estate's driveway. Through my binoculars, I could see lights going on throughout the house and figures moving around inside. Jake's Porsche and Marta's BMW were both parked in the circular drive, impossible to hide. I didn't stick around to see the confrontation, but I didn't need to. I'd accomplished what I wanted. Jake's cozy love nest was blown. His security deposit was forfeit, and he was now banned from renting any properties through that management company. More importantly, there was now an official record of his use of the property for inappropriate purposes. Information that would be very useful to Patricia Turnbull's attorney. Strike 2. Marta came home the next morning looking frazzled and upset. She claimed she'd had a fight with Victoria and had ended up driving around all night, thinking about their relationship. She was vague about the details, but I could see the stress in her face and the way she kept checking her phone. "Everything okay?" I asked over breakfast. "Just family drama," she said. "You know how Victoria can be." Ross left after lunch, hugging both of us goodbye and making us promise to visit him in Portland soon. After his car disappeared down the street, Marta went upstairs to take a nap, claiming she was exhausted from her difficult night. I spent the afternoon in my office, updating my files and planning my next moves. The affair was becoming more expensive and complicated for Jake, which meant the pressure was building. Pressure makes people sloppy, and sloppy people make mistakes. And when Jake Turnbull made his next mistake, I'd be ready to capitalize on it. That evening, I was reading in the living room when Marta's phone buzzed with a text. She was in the kitchen making tea, so I glanced at the screen. It was from Jake. "We need to talk. Things are getting complicated." I smiled and went back to my book. Things were indeed getting complicated, just not in the way Jake expected. The boring husband was just getting started. Monday morning brought the kind of crisis that I'd been anticipating. Marta's phone started ringing at 6 a.m., and I could hear her in the bathroom, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. "What do you mean she has photos?" she whispered. "How is that possible?" I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep, while my wife dealt with the fallout from my anonymous tip to Patricia Turnbull. Based on what I could overhear, Jake's divorce had just become significantly more expensive. "No, we can't meet at the usual place," Marta continued. "We need to be more careful. This is getting out of hand." When she finally came out of the bathroom, she was pale and shaky. "I'm not feeling well," she announced. "I think I'm coming down with something. I might work from home today." "That's probably smart," I said, sitting up and stretching. "There's a nasty bug going around the office. Take care of yourself." She nodded absently, already reaching for her phone again. I went to work as usual, but I kept monitoring the situation through various means I'd set up. Jake's social media posts had stopped completely, a significant change for someone who usually documented his every meal and activity. Marta's location showed her moving around town erratically, probably meeting with Jake at various locations to figure out how to handle their crisis. Around noon, I got a call from my friend Tony, one of my bowling league buddies. "Dan, you need to know something," he said. "I was having lunch at Murphy's pub, and I saw your wife there with some guy. They were sitting in a corner booth, having what looked like a pretty intense conversation. Murphy's Pub was a dive bar on the other side of town, not the kind of place Marta would normally be caught dead in, which meant they were getting desperate for private meeting spots. What did the guy look like? I asked, though I already knew. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. Looked like the kind of guy who drives a sports car and thinks he's better than everyone else. Thanks for letting me know, Tony. I appreciate you looking out for me. Are you okay, man? I mean, it might not be anything, but I'm fine, I said. But thanks for caring enough to call. After work, I drove by Murphy's Pub and spotted Jake's Porsche in the parking lot. I parked across the street and waited. 45 minutes later, Marta and Jake emerged, both looking stressed and unhappy. They stood by their cars for several minutes, having what appeared to be an argument. Finally, Jake grabbed Marta's shoulders and pulled her close, kissing her aggressively. She pushed him away and looked around nervously, then got in her car and drove off. Jake stood there for a moment, running his hands through his hair, before getting into his Porsche and speeding away. I followed Jake to his apartment complex, the upscale development called Harborview Estates. I watched him park and go inside, noting his apartment number and the layout of the complex. Then I drove home to wait for Marta. She arrived an hour later, looking exhausted and defeated. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Any better?" "A little," she said. "I think I just need to rest." That night, while Marta was in the shower, I did something that crossed a line I'd never crossed before. I went through her purse. Hidden in a zippered compartment, I found a burner phone, a cheap prepaid device that she'd obviously bought to communicate with Jake without leaving a trail on our family phone plan. The text history was illuminating. Jake was panicking about his divorce, worried that his wife's new evidence would cost him custody of his children and most of his assets. He was pressuring Marta to leave me immediately so they could be together openly. Marta's responses were more cautious. She was worried about the financial implications of a divorce, concerned about how it would affect Amelia and Ross, and increasingly frustrated with Jake's demands. "I need more time," she'd texted. "This is all happening too fast." "We don't have time," Jake had replied. "Patricia's attorney is going to destroy me if we don't get ahead of this." "Maybe we should cool things down for a while," Marta had suggested. "Are you kidding me? After everything we've been through? After all the promises you made?" I photographed the entire conversation and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I went to my office and added this new intelligence to my growing file. The pressure was working. Jake and Marta were turning on each other, their fairy tale romance cracking under the weight of real-world consequences. But I wasn't done yet. If anything, it was time to escalate. The next morning, I called in sick again and drove to T-Bowled Advertising. I parked across the street and waited until I saw Jake arrive in his Porsche. Then I walked into the building and asked to speak with Dave Millant, the company's managing partner. "I'm Daniel Foster," I told his secretary. "I believe my wife Marta works here. I have some concerns about workplace conduct that I think Mr. Millant should be aware of." Dave Millant was a thin, nervous man in his 50s who clearly didn't like confrontation. When I showed him printed copies of some of the more explicit emails between Marta and Jake, he went pale. "Mr. Foster, this is very concerning," he stammered. "We have strict policies about workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates." "I'm not looking to cause trouble," I said calmly. "I just think you should be aware of what's happening in your company, especially since it appears they've been using company time and resources for personal activities." I left him with copies of the evidence and my contact information, then drove home. Within 2 hours, Marta called me in hysterics. "Dan, you need to come home right now," she said. "Something terrible has happened at work." I found her in our living room, pacing back and forth with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" I asked, playing the concerned husband perfectly. "There's been a complaint about me and Jake," she said. "Someone told Dave that we were having an inappropriate relationship. We've both been suspended pending an investigation." "That's awful," I said. "Who would do something like that?" "I don't know, but whoever it is has emails, photos, all kinds of evidence. Dave showed me some of it, and it's bad, Dan, really bad." I sat down next to her on the couch and put my arm around her shoulders. "Hey, it's going to be okay. We'll figure this out." She looked at me with genuine surprise. "You're not angry?" "I'm angry at whoever is trying to hurt you," I said. "But we're a team, remember? We'll get through this together." She broke down completely then, sobbing against my shoulder while I held her and made soothing sounds. It was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. There's something else, she said when she finally stopped crying. Jake thinks someone is deliberately targeting us. His wife's divorce attorney has photos of us together. And now this thing at work, it can't be a coincidence. You're probably right, I said. Someone definitely has it out for you two. The question is who and why. That night, Marta barely slept. I could feel her tossing and turning beside me, and several times I heard her get up to check her phones. The next morning, she looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her hands shaking as she tried to drink her coffee. I don't know what to do, she admitted. If they fire me, how are we going to pay the mortgage? And Jake is talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else. He wants me to come with him. What do you want to do? I asked. She looked at me with confusion, and something that might have been guilt. I don't know. I'm so confused about everything right now. Well, whatever you decide, you know I'll support you, I said. That's what marriage is about, right? Being there for each other when things get tough. The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. Here I was, offering support to my cheating wife while simultaneously orchestrating the destruction of her affair. But that was the beauty of my plan. I got to be both the devoted husband and the avenging angel, and she had no idea. That afternoon, while Marta was at home, wallowing in self-pity, I drove over to Jake's apartment complex. I'd done some research and learned that Harborview Estates had very strict rules about noise, parking, and conduct. They also had an active residents association that took violations seriously. I spent an hour documenting every possible violation I could find related to Jake's residency. His Porsche was parked in a visitor spot instead of his assigned space. He'd been playing music loud enough to be heard in the hallway. Most importantly, I'd observed him bringing different women to his apartment on multiple occasions, a violation of the lease terms that prohibited excessive overnight guests and activities that disturb other residents. I compiled this information into a formal complaint and submitted it to the property management company and the residents association. I also included photos of Jake's car parked illegally and a recording I'd made of loud music coming from his apartment. Within 24 hours, Jake received a formal warning about lease violations. Within 48 hours, he received a notice to appear before the Residents Association to address multiple complaints. Within 72 hours, he was informed that his lease would not be renewed when it expired at